Welcome to LTS Let's Talk Sense 101 podcast, where we get to talk about real issues that affect real people in real time. My name is Jackson Bin Jeru, a minister of the word, a brand strategist, a creative designer, an entrepreneur, an author, a life coach, and a public transformational speaker. This podcast is all about spiritual nourishment on life issues that bedevil many people. It is a show that will reveal, unveil, inspire, and motivate you to a place of revelation, wisdom, and elevation. Welcome and karibu sana. Yeah, it's another time that we get to speak about real issues that affect real people in real time. Someone requested me if I could be able to share a few tips on how to manage a crisis. Well, he didn't tell me whether he was in crisis or not, but I sort of understood what he was asking of me. Troubled times, hard, rough seasons, difficult periods, and so forth are what we term as crises in our lives. We have so many forms of crisis that are instigated by so many things, but the problem is, how do we handle them? We have crises in marriages, we have crises in leadership, we have crises in finances, crises in the world, and so on. So crisis is just a huge area to cover and constitute of a lot of things. However, I'm going to share on two instances that we all find ourselves in and constitute into a crisis. And this perspective is actually more profound if you can listen to it. But before I start, let me begin by first and foremost making a few statements. Number one, crisis is inevitable. As long as you're living in this life, always be aware or always expect that there are certain seasons and certain situations or certain times that you will have to face trouble or face crisis. Always know that crises are not meant for trees but for people. Number two, crises are manageable. Every situation can be managed if we desire to manage it. Always be hopeful for good outcomes, but always prepare for anything short of good as well. In short, expect the unexpected and prepare for the unexpected, even as you're expecting the expected. Whether we like it or not, and even as far as doing good things, we are bound to find ourselves in situations that seem or appear as crisis. So it is always good to expect a storm, even when we are basking in the sun. Number three, crises have a solution. There's nothing that is without a solution. If it can be managed, it can be solved. There's always a way out of a crisis, even if you cannot see the way out at the moment. You may not have a solution to your crisis, but someone else has a solution to that which you call a crisis. The scripture in Ecclesiastes chapter 1 verse 9 says that there's nothing new under the sun. This means that whatever you may be going through or whatever you may deem as a crisis, regardless of how new it may seem, somebody has already gone through it as well. So the best place to be is to study the history of men who have gone through what you are going through and study the curves of how they came out victoriously. Number four, no crisis is eternal. This means that every crisis or every situation has a shelf life. This includes your problem. This includes your crisis or whatever you deem as a crisis. All things are seasonal, including your problems. Number five, every crisis has a genesis, or every situation has a beginning point. Whatever that has a beginning point eventually has an ending. So by my own definition, a crisis is an foreseen event or a situation that causes restlessness, lack of peace, disorder, or unwanted pressure. In short, it's a difficult situation or a predicament you hadn't budgeted for it. A crisis is a situation that can cause you to lose your desire of living or the strength to keep going. It's an event or a situation that you weren't prepared for it. And even if you were prepared for it, it probably didn't come in the magnitude that you expected of it. Listen, every kingdom suffers a crisis, but it's how a crisis is managed that is less likely to be called a crisis. When you look at the Bible, Genesis chapter 1 verse 2, God had a crisis in his hands, but the design of how he used to forge a way makes us think that that event was less of a crisis. In Genesis chapter 3 again, God has another crisis. So crises are part and parcel of this earthen creation. Different types of crises come at any given time, but understanding them and how to resolve them is what causes us to rise above them and become victorious. We have different types of crises, and usually They are brought about by so many instances. However, in this podcast, I want to speak about 2 instances that you'll always face as part and parcel of your progress. You may decide to call them crisis or simply the way I've just called them. Now listen to this. Life is all about perspectives. Your perspective always creates your reality. The perspective you have over things, over people, over situations, and even God sets the foundation for your decisions. Anything that you'll ever gain or lose in this life will be based upon your perspectives. There are right perspectives and wrong perspectives that will always produce either a right outcome or a wrong outcome. The Bible advocates that we live as wise. The term wisdom simply means to discern the difference in things, discerning the difference in people, difference in situations, and even difference in times. And this discernment is not the discernment that is obvious, in cases like good or evil or right or wrong, but a positioning of knowing what is perfect from what is good, or knowing what is true from what is truth. And this is where we have a difference between the average thinkers and great thinkers. Average thinkers will always make decisions on the line of what is good from what is bad, or what is right from what is wrong. It takes a different mindset to differentiate between what is perfect from what is good. And I'm not saying it's a bad place to know good from evil or right from wrong, but I'm simply saying that this is the lowest form of knowledge. There's a desire of God that we may progress to a place of discerning, knowing and discerning the difference between what is perfect from what is good. When you look at Romans chapter 12 and verse 2, it shows us a glimpse of a progression in God. There's what is good, what is acceptable, as well as what is preferred as a perfect will before God. What is good may not necessarily be what is accepted, and what is accepted may not necessarily be what is termed as a perfect will of God. It takes wisdom to know the difference. To me, I believe wisdom in its simplest expression is putting things into their rightful perspectives. If we can be able to put things into their proper places, we would have fewer problems. Anything that is framed in its right perspective and engaged in the same rightful context will always give right results. This is the science of everything. When you know something, it has to be in its right framework to produce a right result. And this is key and crucial component in making right decisions. So there are 2 perspectives that I want to bring across to provoke your thinking. These 2 instances that I want to speak about are consistent in our lives, and they either serve to constitute as a crisis or otherwise in thought. So whether you are black, white, Hispanic, Asian, or so forth, you're bound to face these 2 instances. So one of them is problems. How do you handle your problems? And the other one is challenges. How do you handle your challenges? And both of them may seem to be alike, but I tell you the truth, they are very different in application. And this is what I want us to discuss at this hour. I'm calling this podcast Distinguishing Between Problems and Challenges. This is gonna be amazing. The revelation here will blow your mind and completely transform your heart. So here goes. I'm gonna begin by speaking about problems. And in definition, a problem is something that is beyond our ability or capability. When we speak about a problem, we speak about obstacles or hindrances that interfere with our progress in life. When we speak about problems, we are simply indicating, or we are simply saying that there are issues or situations in our lives that are beyond our control, that are beyond our ability, and that are beyond our capacity. Those are what we call problems. So problems are always existing or are doctored to bring hindrances or obstacles. In short, problems are always created to stop us from moving or to stop us from progressing. So by definition, a problem is 1, a situation doctored preventing something from being achieved, and 2, exposing something that is hidden and bringing it to the light. A problem can either be people, a situation like sicknesses, circumstances like poverty, or things. But a man's biggest problem is another man. Look out for the next episode. For more information, or you have a desire to know more, book a session with Jackson Jeru or invite him for any of your corporate speaking. Write to us on letstalksense.info@gmail.com. That is letstalksense.info@gmail.com. Or follow us on Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, and TikTok. Our Facebook handle is www.facebook.com/LTS11podcast. That is www.facebook.com/LTS11podcast. Our YouTube handle is www.youtube.com/LTS11podcast, and Instagram www.instagram.com/LTS11podcast.